Entering Corsi Nation.
We're today going to focus on, we've done tremendously well with this book, which is the Assassination of John F. Kennedy, the final analysis. It's Dr. Mantik's work. I'm going to explain it to you in a minute, some of the key issues out of this book. I've been on Steve Bannon with it a number of times now, including on his 2-hour coup d'etat special, which ran this weekend on the War Room. And what the book shows, and I'm going to get into some of the advanced details here. The book, by the way, is going to be published in Italy, Spain, and it looks like Hungary. It looks like all three. This book is going international very quickly. And over the weekend, it was number 7 on Amazon. It's doing extremely well, and thank you. This book is, I think, maybe the most important book I've written, because it demonstrates that the government has been lying about the Kennedy assassination now for 60 years. The evidence is clear that JFK was shot by 2 frontal shots. He was not shot by anything that came in, no headshots from the Texas School Book Depository, none whatsoever. And in fact, you've got a clear case of a government coup d'etat, government staged assassination in plain daylight, the streets of Dallas, and it's unmistakable. Now, today I'm going to cover one of the key aspects of understanding this case, and I want to have Chris show some of the pictures in the book, which we're going to describe in detail. So if you go to page 171 of the book, there's a diagram here of what Dr. Mantik's work was. Dr. Mantik, and Chris, if you'll enlarge that so we can see the diagram, the skull x-ray a little bit more closely, that's good. And center it there, perfect. This is a lateral x-ray of JFK's autopsy skull x-ray. On the right-hand side, by the red spot there, that's the front of JFK's head. As the blue line goes across, it ends up in the back of JFK's head. So the front is on the right side of the x-ray, the back is on the left. Now, Dr. David Mantik, my co-author, is a PhD in physics. His actual topic of his dissertation was to look at X-ray issues and the physics of X-rays. He then got an MD, and he's been a radiation oncologist for over 40 years. That means he reads X-rays for cancer patients. He's an expert on X-rays. He's seen the JFK X-rays in the archives 9 times more than anyone else. He is able to demonstrate that all 3 of the existing JFK X-rays are forgeries, they're fake, they're not the originals, and that yet Kennedy was shot twice from the front and once from the back. Now, we've covered before in previous emails and previous interviews and previous podcasts on this show, the frontal shots, and I want to show you one of them and then explain the other 2. But you'll see here a shot came into the forehead of JFK right at the beginning here. And Chris, if you'll put your cursor over there by the entry point on the blue line of the skull, right there, it entered. And there's a trail of debris. That's the bullet broke up and it fragmented. The largest fragment went to the back. That's the way a bullet breaks up in the head, because the largest fragment has the most weight and it will have the most momentum. It will go the farthest. At the front of the head, this doesn't show it so clearly, but we have enlargements in the book which show that when the bullet first came into the head, there are a lot of little dust-like fragments. And the red blob is not that all these colors were superimposed to make it easier to see what's in the X-ray, but the blob was like a blob of mercury. It's probably a mercury bullet that could not be removed in what we're going to focus on today, which was pre-autopsy surgery. Now, the problem was this is one of the main shots that came in. There was also a second shot that hit Kennedy's right ear. I'm going to give Craig another page to go to here in a minute. So, Craig, if you'll go to page 201 in the book, you'll see right here is what we're going to talk about right at the ear. Okay, enlarge that a little bit. When the bullet enters at the temporal bone, by the right ear, which is what it does. It's an oblique shot. An oblique shot means one that kind of comes at an angle to the head, tangential. And what it does is it creates a keyhole fracture. Show the right above that too. Let's start there, above, just the figure above that. I guess it's on the previous page, where it shows these are keyhole fractures. So the bullet enters and it kind of creates a fracture that spreads out like a keyhole. So when we go to the X-ray, you can see that there is exactly this kind of a fracture. So now we're going to page 201, the second set of diagrams here, Chris, where you can see that, in fact, at 201, page 201, there's the keyhole fracture, and it's right by the right ear, and it blew out the back of JFK's head. A large piece of the occipital bone flew off the head, and the damage done was massive with a shot. A third shot entered at the back of the head and was from a low angle. Most likely, we know for sure that the back shot hit first because the Harper fragment, which the bone that flew off Kennedy's head, landed on the left lawn across from the grassy knoll. And I'm going to show you some pictures of what happened in terms of the sequence from the Zapruder film in which this happens. But this is the shot that is violently back and to the left. So at frame 313, Jack Kennedy of the Zapruder film gets hit in the back. He moves forward a little bit, and you see lots of brain tissue spray up out of the front of his head. And about 2 seconds later, at about frame 335, Jack Kennedy is hit by this shot in the temple, and there's massive gore coming out of Kennedy's head. So, Chris, if we go to page 229, we'll show there at page 229. This is a Zapruder film. This is a Zapruder film frame 331. Chris will get there in a minute. He's navigating through the book. 331. Okay, so there's a Zapruder film. Enlarge that if you can. Even more. You can see Kennedy's head explodes right there. Jackie is in front, behind him. His head is exploding. That's the shot that hit him by the ear, and it was going to blow out the back of his head. Now, the cop, let's see, then go to the frame 412. That's page 230. And enlarge that. See, Jack Kennedy's thrown violently back into the left. Okay, and that's now at 313. You see that Hill's reaching up to the limousine nearly 2 seconds after 313. This is frame 343. Jack Kennedy's head is hit a second time. This time the blood and the gore spray Clint Hill, who's climbing on, trying to grab the hand grip on the back left of the limousine. He is splattered by Kennedy's brain and gore. And if you'll back out from that picture, so there you go. There's one of the motorcycle policemen, Bobby Hargis, is seen right behind Clint Hill. He's the inboard motorcycle cop on the left. He gets splattered by Kennedy's blood and gore from this head wound. All on the left. Bobby Hargis thinks it's so massive that he himself has been hit. Now, Jackie comes out of the backseat of the car, and she's going to reach for something on the trunk. And on page 324, it's clear that Jackie finds a piece of the brain debris on the left side of the trunk. So page 234, which is another couple away from that, I believe. There, enlarge that. See, Jackie's reaching for a piece of the brain on the back left. She's got it. She's going back into the car. Clint Hill's trying to help her make sure she doesn't fall off the car. And she's going to put that brain piece back in Jack Kennedy's head. But by the time the limousine goes through the triple underpass, she's going to have Jack Kennedy sitting up, thinking she can revive him, when in fact it's impossible. Sometimes when people break an arm, they think they can just put it back together again. You can't. So at this frame, which happens at about a 6-second sequence, the third shot was the one that hit Jack Kennedy at the ear and did the massive damage of the blowout of the head. So 2 frontal shots. Now the doctors at Parkland Hospital, and I'm just going to read you what they say, because the doctors at Parkland Hospital say very clearly that Kennedy's wound was seen as frontal shots. All the doctors at Parkland reported that he had frontal shots. And this is important because there's a difference between how Kennedy was seen at Parkland and how Kennedy was seen at Bethesda, where the autopsy was done. So Dr. Crenshaw, one of the attending physicians in trauma room at Parkland Hospital, said, "I walked to the president's head to get a closer look. His entire right cerebral hemisphere, back right, appeared to be gone. It looked like a crater, an empty crater. All I could see there was mangled, bloody tissue. From the damage I saw, there was no doubt in my mind that the bullet had entered his head through the front. As it surgically passed through his cranium, the missile obliterated part of the temporal and all of the parietal and occipital lobes. That means it furrowed a path to the back of the head. The wound resembled a deep furrow in a freshly plowed field. Several years later, when I viewed slow motion films of the bullet striking the president, the physics of the head being thrown back provided final and complete confirmation of a frontal entry by the bullet to the cranium." The descriptions of the Crenshaw added, he said more about the wound. He said, "I noticed that the entire right hemisphere of his brain was missing, beginning at the hairline and extending all the way back behind his right ear. Pieces of skull that had not been blown away were hanging by blood-mattered hair. Based on my experience with trauma to the head from gunshots, I knew that only a high-velocity bullet with a rifle could dissect a cranium that way. Part of his brain, the cerebellum, was dangling from the back of his head by a single strand of tissue, looking like a piece of dark gray blood-soaked sponge that could easily fit in the palm of your hand. The cerebellum is even of a different color than the rest of the brain. These doctors knew that the back of the head was blown away." Clark added, "Blood was still seeping from the wound onto the gurney, dripping into the kick bucket on the floor. Seeing that, I became even more pessimistic. I also identified a small opening about the diameter of a pencil in the midline of his throat to be an entry bullet hole. I thought I'd seen dozens of them in the emergency room. At that point, I knew he'd been shot twice. That's the shot that came through the windshield and hit Kennedy in the throat." Now, what these, and in the front of the book, I've got blue arrows which show you where the shots came, both on the skull x-ray. Chris, if you can enlarge that, you'll see again the shot to the right forehead, which went across the top of the cranium and stayed there. Shot to the right temple, which blew out the back of the head. The shot in the low region of the back of the head, at the knob in the back of the head, that blew out a lot of tissue coming forward, created that head flap that they talk about. That's the difference between frame 331, which was the shot to the back of the head, and about 334, which was the shot to the temple. Okay, now the doctors at Parkland did a press conference. And also, Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff held a makeshift press conference in the Parkland Hospital classroom about a half an hour after Kennedy was pronounced dead at 1:31 p.m. Central Standard Time, November 22nd, 1963, at Parkland Hospital. And Kilduff said that he pointed to his right temple and he said, "What killed Jack Kennedy?" They were asking, what happened? How did he die? He said he died of a gunshot wound in the brain. "Dr. Berkeley told me it was a simple matter, Tom." He's answering a question from one of the people attending the press conference, "of a bullet right through the head." And during the transcript and the film that exist, Kilduff explains to the press that the shots that killed Kennedy came from the right side. That's the front. Now, a photographer for the AP named Elchins took a photograph of this time, the moment when Kennedy is shot, and you can see through the window of the limousine, and it's clear that the Texas School Book Depository is in back of Jack Kennedy when the shooting starts. Okay, now that's let me find that picture for you here a second. It's on chapter 5. It's on page 277. It's a colorized version of the close-up of the Elchins photograph, but you'll see Jack Kennedy is soon. Chris will get it here in a second. page 277, right there. Enlarge it a bit. Even more, if you can. Yeah, you can see Jack Kennedy's got his hands up to his throat. So that's the throat wound, which was the very first shot that hit Jack Kennedy. And then as you zoom back out again in the photograph, you can see the Texas School Book Depository in the background. Now, when the Secret Service took the body of Kennedy out of Parkland Hospital's morgue, they took it out of the trauma room. They took it out at gunpoint. They put up against the wall the coroner Earl Rose and a justice of the peace that had come to claim the body. This was a Dallas murder. The autopsy had to be done in Dallas. And the Secret Service pulled their guns. So we're taking them back to Washington. Secret Service had also begun washing the car out with water. They had a pail. They were washing the car out. And so therefore you see here that the Secret Service is taking the body. They're destroying evidence. They're blocking people from seeing the shot in the window to the it came from the front of the windshield because it had a puncture mark on the outside of the windshield. When a bullet hits safety glass, it punctures like a pencil. The inside of the window, the glass shattered and beveled out and flew back at Jack Kennedy. And that, in fact, what hit him in the throat might have been a piece of shroud from the windshield, bullet being shot through the windshield from the front. So we have shooters on in the grassy knoll on the south side, opposite the grassy knoll, up by the railroad yard above the triple underpass at that side, a shooter behind that fence. We have a shooter on the grassy knoll, and we have a shooter at a low angle behind Jack Kennedy. It's clearly a crossfire. Now, and the airplane is going back, the Air Force One is going back to Washington on November 22nd, 1963. And about an hour into the flight, it's announced by the Dallas police that they've apprehended Lee Harvey Oswald, and he is the lone gun assassin, shooting from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. Now the government's got a problem because the body coming out of Parkland, announced to the world by the doctors, has shots from the front. But the Dallas Texas School Book Depository is behind Jack Kennedy where the shooting started. So now the evidence of the body is at a complete odds to the cover story that Lee Harvey Oswald did all the shooting. There were 3 shells, spent shells, cartridges from a Mannlicher Carcano rifle found on the 6th floor corner window of the Texas School Book Depository with the books arranged like a sniper's nest. And that was part of the frame-up. And Oswald worked in that building. They said he was on the 6th floor. He fired the shots. So now the government is stuck with a story that doesn't match the evidence that they have of Jack Kennedy's body. Now, what happens is, and this is part of the story that's kind of remarkable. It's hard to, this is going to be challenging some people's credibility, but the Secret Service managed to get the body out of the ceremonial casket at Dallas. The body, Jack Kennedy's body, left Parkland Hospital wrapped in sheets, with his head wrapped in sheets, body placed in this bronze ceremonial casket, which the Secret Service called a local funeral home, and they got brought to Parkland Hospital. They put Jack Kennedy's body in there, wrapped in sheets, and the Secret Service took it out at gunpoint and brought it to Love Field. There's photographs of the casket being brought into Air Force One, and everybody assumes the body's in there. However, the body's not in there ultimately. The body gets moved from the ceremonial casket and put into probably one of the storage compartments of the Air Force One for the flight back to Washington. Why? The government knows it's got to do pre-autopsy surgery. The body does not match the crime. In other words, the government's narrative trapped them into a 3-shot sequence with all the guns shot from behind. If Lee Harvey Oswald was the only gunman, he couldn't magically have jumped in front of the limousine, shot, and then jumped back up to the 6th floor. That's preposterous. So therefore, the government story doesn't fit together. That's one of the continuing themes. The government story never fit together because it was a lie. Now, when the Air Force One lands at Andrews Air Force Base on the night of November 22nd, 1963, just after Jack's shot, Jack and Bobby get this lift, and they take the casket with a whole bunch of people out of Air Force One, and they load it into a gray Navy ambulance. Jackie and Bobby get into the back seat. They drive off to go to Parkland Hospital. Lyndon Johnson gives a little speech. The lights go off. Lyndon Johnson helicopters to the White House. The body is taken out of the storage compartment and is put in the helicopter, and it's helicoptered to Bethesda, where it's put into a black hearse and brought into the morgue in a pinkish gray shipping casket, which when it's open, Jack Kennedy's body is in a body bag. Now, that's not how Jack Kennedy left Dallas. The body's been moved out of the ceremonial casket. The casket that Jackie and Bob drove off with was empty. Didn't have Jack Kennedy's body in it. Now, Chris, we'll go to page 371. We've got here 3 casket entries into the morgue, page 371. So the testimony of the Navy personnel who were at the autopsy in Bethesda Naval Hospital said that when Jack Kennedy's body arrived, it arrived in a silver shipping casket, this pinkish gray or pinkish silver casket. You have to enlarge that. I want to talk about that table. And I want to describe how one of the corpsmen described the body arriving. I just have to find it here for a second. And here we go. Paul O'Connor, whose testimony is very important in this whole case. Paul O'Connor said, the back of the morgue opened up and a crew of hospital corpsmen and a higher ranking corpsman, Dennis David. This is at 6:30 p.m. That's noted in the duty officer's notes, a guy named Bajajian, Boyijian, who made detailed notes of the body arrival at 6:35. This is an hour and a half before the official autopsy. And Paul O'Connor says, the back of the morgue opened and a crew of hospital corpsmen and a higher ranking corpsman, Dennis David, brought in a plain pinkish gray, what I call a shipping casket. It was not ornate. It's not damaged. It was just pinkish gray casket, a pinkish gray casket. They brought it up into the morgue and set it. We had 2 tables on the morgue, autopsy tables. They were back to front. They weren't side by side. They were back to front. They brought it up front where we were. At that time, we opened up the coffin. Inside was a body bag. Now, William Matson Law, who was doing a lot of interview with the Navy corpsman at Bethesda during the autopsy, said, now, are you sure that was a body bag? And O'Connor said, absolutely sure there was a body bag. We unzipped it quickly. Inside was a nude body with a bloody sheet wrapped around the head of the body. We lifted the body onto the table. Now, at Parkland, what the government decides to do, so that's at 6:35, and you see the witnesses to it, a number of witnesses. And the remarks here are that it was a black hearse. The body was inside a body bag. Not how it left Dallas. Clearly switched somewhere along the line. Now, what happened was that the 2 Bethesda surgeons, who are Hume and Boswell, are assigned by the Navy to do surgery of the head because they've got to alter the wounds. And they're observed doing this. So they come in, they begin to take the entrance wound at the front of the forehead, and they do surgery incising that and making it kind of appear to be an exit wound, like a flap of the head is sticking up. The parietal bone, which is the bone at the top of the head, they take a saw and they cut open and they remove the parietal bone. So the bone at the top of Kennedy's head is gone. And they start messing inside in the internal of Kennedy's head to look for bullets. So Craig, show page 390. And this picture there's a color version of this picture, and it's very gory. Actually, show 386 first, 386. This is a very important part of the story. Enlarge that. These are pictures of Jack Kennedy in the morgue and the pre-autopsy surgery. This is before the official surgery began. We know that because there's a head brace under Jack Kennedy's head. That head brace was not in the autopsy where the gallery was. You can see in the right where there's kind of a flap sticking out of the forehead at the front, a big flap of tissue. Craig, you might, Chris, you might locate that with your cursor. Just locate that flap. It's right there. That's it, right there. Looks like a wing flap. No, not there. Go to that's it, the white bone there. That's the wing flap. That's how they obscured, erased the frontal shot, which was like a pencil shot. And then go to page 390. And you can see that they made a complete mess of Jack Kennedy's top of his head. That's how Kennedy's head looked. It did not look anything like that at Parkland. That's clear evidence of pre-autopsy surgery. They're removing and looking for bullet parts. It actually looks like there's a brace placed in the Kennedy's head in some of these pictures, inside the head, to hold it together. This is massive surgery. It's massive destruction of a crime scene. The body's the best evidence. These pictures, which are legitimate pictures, and in fact, if you go to page 392, this is the Boswell sketch, which was made during the autopsy, and he tries to say that the entire parietal bone was missing. He wrote down missing. Just scroll up a little bit and enlarge that, please. So where by the arrow is, that whole piece of skull is missing, and you can see Boswell wrote the word missing there. Okay, that was not the way Kennedy left Parkland. There are two witnesses, Tom Robinson. Okay, so various of the witnesses made it clear that the body was clearly altered by Boswell and Humes, and you have clear reactions. We cite a lot of the reactions in the book of the corpsmen who were there and how they reacted to what they were seeing, and they were shocked. Of course, they were all sworn to secrecy. One of the mortician, Tom Robinson, who was there to get Kennedy's body prepared for being taken back to the White House, was very vocal about this. Tom Robinson witnessed the doctors removing significant portions of the rear and top of the president's skull with a saw to gain access to his brain. He also witnessed numerous bullet fragments being removed from the brain, so that Humes surgically removed evidence of the bullet's entry from a very high up in the right forehead, above the right eye, leaving evidence of this illicit post-mortem surgery in the form of an ugly bright red incision in the right forehead, which no one recalls seeing in Dallas. Hume also removed significant portions of brain tissue from the forebrain to eliminate any evidence of a bullet track which could prove there was a shot from the front. He removed at least 10 bullet fragments from the brain, according to Tom Robinson, and at least 4 of them were large enough to warrant a receipt being prepared. This is according to Dennis David, who was one of the officers in charge of the corpsmen assisting in the pre-autopsy surgery. A bullet may also have been removed from behind the right ear. That's according to an FBI memo written the night of the autopsy from Alan Belmont to Clyde Tolson, from one of the FBI agents to J. Edgar Hoover's boyfriend in the FBI. Now, the last piece I want to cover today is that there are 2 FBI agents who are attending this autopsy. Their names are Siebert, S-I-B-E-R-T, and O'Neill. And what they did report in their 302 after action report was that when Kennedy's body at 8 o'clock came into the morgue, it was taken out of the ceremonial casket, put on the autopsy table, everybody gasped because the damage to the head was so significant. And Humes must have said that there was surgery to the front of the head, pre-autopsy surgery to the head, because that's what Siebert and O'Neill wrote in their 302 report, documenting that the head had been altered at Bethesda to change front shots seen at Parkland into back shots seen at Bethesda. Douglas Hume, who did 5 volumes, from the Assassinations Records Review Board, government agency created after the Oliver Stone movie, to get all of this, all the classified information as much as possible declassified on the Kennedy assassination. That's when the Kennedy Records Act was passed by Congress. We still have records that have not been released. So Horn explained what he thought was Hume's utterance. This is what Douglas Horn wrote in his 5-volume Inside the ARRB, the Assassinations Records Review Board. Horn explained the following. He said, in front of the large morgue audience following the second Dallas casket entry at 8 p.m., remember, this is audience 2 who knew nothing about the clandestine surgery that Humes had performed earlier that evening. It's clear to me that Humes panicked. And to combat the astonishment and no doubt skeptical comments from the gallery about the enormous head wound, supposedly caused by 1 bullet. Remember, there were 3 shots fired. James Tague, a witness at Dallas to the assassination, got nicked in the cheek by a bullet that missed. We had now 2 shots that hit Kennedy. 1 hit the back. They thought came out the neck. Connolly had a lot of wounds. So they only had 1 shot to hit the head. They couldn't have 2. And this much damage was caused by 1 bullet was incredible. No one believed it who knew anything about gunshot wounds. So to counter the skeptical comments, Humes must have blurted out as a cover for himself, declaring that someone, clearly not himself, had performed surgery on the top of the skull. At least one other witness in the morgue recalls him asking if surgery had been performed in Dallas. Humes clearly knew that was not the case, since he himself had performed it at Bethesda. Okay, so we now know that this is a key point of the book. What's the point? The point is that the government for 60 years has lied. The government had a failed narrative. There were 3 shots that hit Kennedy's head, 2 from the front. The Parkland doctors knew it. The government has to start bullying the Parkland doctors to change their story, on the phone with the Parkland doctors from Bethesda all night, the night of the autopsy. And ultimately, the doctors in Bethesda threatened the doctors at Parkland. Their medical certification will be taken away because they didn't know that Kennedy had a back wound that could have come out his throat, and that not all the wounds were supposedly from the front. Well, the Parkland Hospital doctors were young. Dr. Malcolm Perry, who did the tracheotomy, was in his 30s. He had young children. He was going to lose his certification to practice medicine. He buckled under the pressure. Had he said, I am not going to lie for you, I'm going to tell the truth about what I saw, the government would have had a major problem. He buckled under the pressure. And so therefore, Boswell and Humes and other pathologists who attended the autopsy, Dr. Fink, they wrote like 4 versions of this Kennedy assassination, trying to put the evidence together to explain everything by 1 shot to the back of the head from Lee Harvey Oswald at a top angle in the head where it was not hit from the back. None of the government's autopsy evidence is validated by the skull x-ray, which is the definitive evidence of what happened to Jack Kennedy's head. And now we see the pre-autopsy surgery that was done to the top of Jack Kennedy's head. And we know the government was creating an elaborate narrative, a Truman story, Jim Carrey Truman story, where you think you're watching truth, but you're just watching a CIA constructed government narrative, and the press goes right along with it. And this is pounded into people. The back of the book, there's a CIA memo for 1967, 3-page memo, which says that anyone who dares object to the Warren Commission reports, the CIA will run psychological operations on to counter their argument and to destroy the people's credibility. The term conspiracy theory was invented by the CIA to discredit anyone who dared not believe this preposterous cover story that Lee Harvey Oswald shot Jack Kennedy from behind with a Mannlicher Carcano rifle, Italian rifle that didn't shoot straight in World War II, and a misaligned scope. 3 brilliant shots through a tree as Jack Kennedy is going down the hill 3-degree angle towards a triple underpass on a highway that twists when all you've got is a headshot of the neck and the head and shoulders of Jack Kennedy. And Lee Harvey Oswald had the limousine turn right in front of his window, going from Houston Street onto Elm, and he could have shot right down in the limousine. Makes no sense. Nothing about the government story makes sense. It's all patched together in order to prop up this lying narrative. The truth is, this was a professional kill. The CIA and the military-industrial complex pulled it off and covered it up. Allen Dulles, who was fired by Jack Kennedy as head of the CIA after the Bay of Pigs, was appointed by President Lyndon Johnson to be on the Warren Commission. He made sure all the evidence stayed away from the CIA. We've been lied to for 60 years. What's the importance of this? What else have we been lied to about? Climate change, buildings that were not hit by the airplanes falling down in 9/11, weapons of mass destruction that weren't found in Iraq when George W. Bush invaded Iraq, going after, Saddam Hussein in 1991, the Kuwait invasion, and then going after Saddam Hussein after 9/11 over trying to find Osama bin Laden. We've been lied to. And it's because the criminal CIA, which participates in drug activity around the world, runs the pedophilia, caught HSBC in massive money laundering scheme with the Mexican cartels. They're monitored every day. Their wire transfers by the Federal Reserve and the National Security Agency. And HSBC was fined $1.9 billion based on my investigation, leading to a Department of Justice investigation, criminal investigation. No one went to jail. The book, I think, is going to be game-changing. It's going to be published around the world. You can get it on Amazon. We are getting some in the stores. I'm told Target has the book now, and the book will be available. Let's wrap this up. In the end, God always wins. God's going to win here, too. And this book is a major part. Dr. Mantik's work is brilliant. It's science. It's indisputable. It's optical density measurements. This cannot be argued with because it's there. It's quantitatively measured. It's been Dr. Mantik's work has been validated by Dr. Michael Chesser, who independently did optical density measurements on the X-rays and came to the same conclusions. This is game-changing, and it's going to make a worldwide impact, especially today when people know all the lies we've been told. We're going to continue with this narrative through the election. We'll resume tomorrow with discussing more of the current politics, including the now Iran-Iraq war. We're entering into a dark time, but I don't believe God created the human race to fail. There will be a judgment of God. We should get down on our knees in the spirit of 2 Chronicles 7:14 and ask God to forgive us for taking God out of our schools, our hearts, our homes, and our marriages. God will win. And we're doing our part here to shine the light of truth on one of the darkest deep state lies in history. Thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Jerome Corsi on TheTruthCentral.com. Today is Tuesday, April 16th, 2024. We'll be back tomorrow.